Preamble, intro. This is what happened when the mechanic saw my car and said something that I will never forget. The mechanic checked my car and noticed certain things that gave me away, but instead of criticizing me, you won't believe his reaction. Stay until the end to know this story. So make yourself comfortable, and we invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate the little bell so you don't miss any video. It was a hot day, and as usual my car decided to leave me stranded in the middle of the road. I didn't know what to do. I was a few miles from home and I didn't understand what had gone wrong this time. I only knew that the engine had made a strange sound and then shut off completely. I tried to start it several times, but nothing. There was no way to start it. I felt helpless, trapped, and out of options. So I decided to call a mechanic, a number a trusted friend had given me. "Don't worry, I'll fix it fast," he had told me. I realized I had no choice but to trust him. After a few minutes, a car appeared in front of me, a black SUV. It was the mechanic I had contacted, a sturdy guy with a neatly trimmed beard and a relaxed attitude. He got out of the car with a friendly smile. "Are you liking the video so far? If so, leave us a like and subscribe. Let's keep going." "How are you doing? How's everything?" he said in a deep but warm voice. He explained that he was a local mechanic and had been in the business for years. As I approached my car to check it out, I could sense an air of assurance about him, a confidence that seemed to come from his experience. "Let's see what's wrong with this toy, huh?" he said as he opened the hood of my car. I watched him sitting in the driver's seat, not quite knowing what to expect. I was surprised at the ease with which he began to check the engine components. While he was concentrating on the engine, I was thinking about how uncomfortable I felt in that situation. I had never liked depending on anyone to fix anything, especially a car. But I realized I had no choice. At that moment, a strange sensation began to invade me. My gaze kept drifting to his body as he moved around the car. I noticed how his tight t-shirt outlined his muscles, how his arms moved steadily as he turned one of the nuts. I tried not to think about it too much, but a part of me was drawn to him. It was clear that he was someone who knew what he was doing, but there was also something about his presence that unnerved me. The mechanic began to check the underside of the car. As he did so, he bent over and his shirt rode up a bit, revealing more of his muscles. My mind began to wander. I didn't understand why my body was reacting this way. I knew it was an unusual situation, but this sudden attraction I couldn't ignore. My heart was beating faster and I felt uncomfortable. I wondered why I felt this way, why I suddenly couldn't stop thinking about him. Before we continue, we invite you to like and subscribe. Let's continue. That's when something happened that changed everything. As the mechanic stood up, he noticed something on the car that caught his attention. Instead of simply continuing with the checkup, he stopped and looked over at me. For a moment, we just stared at each other in silence. It was an intense gaze, something I had never experienced before. "You know, you don't have to get so worked up," he told me with a subtle smile. "I know something's going on in your head." I froze. I didn't know how to respond. I was too confused by my own feelings. What did he know about me? How had he come to that conclusion? I tried to look away, but he had caught me. "What I mean," he continued, "is that I've noticed a few things about your car." I looked at him, not knowing if I should be concerned or just ignore him. But he didn't seem upset or worried. In fact, his tone was soft, almost confident. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to hide my anxiety. He sighed before responding. "Come on, don't play dumb," he said. "I've seen some details in your car that are not so common. Some books, some objects. And it's not the first time I've seen something like that. Don't worry, I'm not going to judge you." It was as if the air became thicker at that moment. My hands began to sweat. I didn't understand what was happening, but something in the way he looked at me, something in his voice, told me that maybe it wasn't that serious. It wasn't like he was accusing me of anything. In fact, his tone was much more sympathetic than I had expected. "Listen," he continued, "I'm gay too, and if you ever need to talk or whatever, you know where to find me." The revelation was like an electric shock. I stood there, not knowing how to react. The whole world seemed to have stopped for a second. I couldn't believe what he had just said. The mechanic? The guy who had come to fix my car. I felt vulnerable. like my whole being was exposed in a way I had never anticipated. "Really?" was all I could say, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded, a calm smile on his face. After that exchange, something changed in the air. The atmosphere no longer felt tense or uncomfortable. Instead, there was a kind of latent electricity between us, something I had never experienced before. He went back to work on the car, but now there was a calmness in the way he moved, as if that small moment of honesty had broken down all barriers. Don't forget to subscribe and like us for more content like this. Let's continue. I, on the other hand, could not stop watching him. How was it possible for a stranger to make me feel so understood in such a short time? We had barely exchanged a few words, but he seemed to know me better than many people in my life. When he finally finished checking the car, he stood up and wiped his hands with a rag. He walked towards me with that same confidence that had characterized him from the beginning, but now there was something else in his gaze, a kind of warmth that I hadn't noticed before. "Well, it's ready. The problem was simpler than it seemed," he said, handing me the keys. "Thank you," I replied a little nervously. I wanted to say something else, something that could convey to her how much that moment meant to me, but the words just wouldn't come out. "Hey," he said suddenly, breaking the silence, "would you like some coffee? There's a coffee shop nearby, and I think we could both use a break." My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. Was he asking me out on a date? For a moment I hesitated. I wasn't sure if accepting was the right thing to do. But then I remembered what he had said earlier about being sincere and not worrying about what others thought. So, with a lump in my throat and a mixture of fear and excitement, I accepted. "Yes, of course. I'd love to," I replied, trying to sound calmer than I really was. The coffee shop was only a few minutes' drive away, and the ride was in his vehicle. Along the way, we talked about trivial things. Traffic, the weather, how annoying car repairs can be. But underneath that superficial conversation, there was something deeper unfolding. It felt like we were building a bridge, step by step, to something new and exciting. When we arrived at the coffee shop, we chose a table in a quiet corner. He ordered a black coffee, and I ordered a cappuccino. As we waited for our drinks, he leaned slightly toward me, as if he was about to share a secret. "You know, I don't usually do this," he admitted, "but there's something about you that caught my eye from the beginning. Maybe it's the way you look at me, or maybe I was just waiting for an excuse to get to know you better." His words took my breath away. It was the first time someone had been so direct with me, and while I felt vulnerable, it was also incredibly freeing. "Yes, really. So don't worry about anything. We all have our secrets, don't we?" We were silent for a moment. My mind was still in chaos, processing everything I had just heard. I was grateful that he wasn't judging me, but at the same time, I felt overwhelmed by the confession. "So, see you later?" he asked, trying to break the tension. I nodded without thinking. My mind was still too confused to process what had just happened, but in that moment I felt a connection. Something had changed. It wasn't just my car that needed to be fixed. "Sure," I replied. "See you." If you liked the video and this content brought you value, leave us a like and share it with your friends so you don't miss it.